Welcome into Pod Patrol, the Season 1 finale. I'm Jeff Dikis, and this is Pod Patrol. Joining me today, my wife, Dr. Ashley Dikis. Thanks for hopping on today.
Of course. I don't know that I had a choice, but I'm happy to be here.
All right. So Season 1 is coming to an end. This is very exciting for us. When I started talking about starting a podcast, we kind of didn't know what that would entail, what that would mean, and where it would go. So we thought we'd do a Season 1 recap, the finale. And is it the end of Pod Patrol? Are we coming to an end? Is this the end of Pod Patrol? Is this the final episode of Pod Patrol ever? Well, stay tuned and you'll find out. So we thought it'd be interesting for you to kind of interview me and kind of talk through some things. So what would you like to ask me?
Oh boy, so many things that I would like answers to, but we'll stick to
Let's keep it to podcast.
Pod Patrol related things.
Yeah.
I guess first off would be, how did the experience of this kind of first season kind of meet up with your expectations for what this whole thing would be like?
Yeah, it's a lot more work. You know, when you think about starting a podcast, it sounds fun. Hey, I'll get together, we'll talk with interesting people. My idea was to make it educational and entertaining. You know, if you're entertained, you'll stick around for the education part of it. You and I both work with students, and it seemed like a good way to engage the students and residents and whoever that might be interested in these things, because we're talking to really, really advanced people in their field that are offering up really intelligent tips and pearls and all those things. So it really does apply to all ages who listen in. But you expect it to be fun. You don't understand all of the time commitment that goes into it behind the scenes in terms of editing, getting guests, following up with guests, getting things scheduled, finding a mutual time that you can record. Then, like I said, editing it, putting it all together, doing the promotional graphics, splicing together the clips, putting that on social media. It's a whole thing. You realize that people that have these famous podcasts have a whole team of people behind them that are doing all these things. It's really just me. You know, we started out with Leland from Shoal, who I am forever grateful for helping me get this thing off the ground. And Leland, obviously, you know, because you work at the school, it's an insanely busy time when you get back into the fall and the students come back, and his job entails helping students get placed in residencies and externships and all that stuff. So thank you to Leland for helping us get this off the ground. But yeah, that's the main thing, is not really fully understanding how much work has gone into this thing from the get-go. And it's just a lot of time-consuming things. I think it's worth it. I think it will be worth it. I've had so many people reach out with kind words, sending me a message on LinkedIn, Instagram, in person, emails, texts, people reaching out that I know, and lots of people that I've never met before reaching out and saying, hey, keep up the good work. Really appreciate it. I love the episodes. Keep going. So we'll see if I have it in me to keep this thing going.
So with that in mind, what are your plans for season 2? What can people expect if season 2 is in the works?
Well, you gave it away. There was supposed to be a cliffhanger of like, are we going to continue? Don't you watch TV? Season 1 finale. Something big happens.
But you watch TV with me. You know I don't like surprises. I want to know what happens next. So give us.
We're not like Game of Thrones. We're not going to kill off a character. We're not going to get like.
I hope not.
Yeah.
This could take a scary turn.
Yeah, that's a little too real. Yeah. Anyway, season 1 finale is supposed to be like a big deal. All right, cliffhanger, is no longer. Season 2 is coming soon. We have lots of really, really good guests booked, and I'm super excited to talk with them and get those episodes out there for people to hear. So the plans are continuing on season 2. Season 1 finale will finish up here in December, and then the plan is to start season 2 sometime in the new year. Early 2025 is the plan at this point. We'll see how that goes with timing and holidays and all the stuff that goes into editing and getting everything ready. But that's the plan, is finishing up season 1 with this episode, and then recording some episodes, and then hitting it back hard in early 2025 with season 2.
So another kind of piece of season 2, something that's kind of new that you're considering, is the newsletter. Do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, that sounds super boring, doesn't it?
It when we say it like that,
I think
it
people
sounds a
listening
little
had to
wah
pull the
wah.
car over. They were like,
Yeah.
"Hold on, wait, newsletter?
What
Let me fine
everyone's
tune my
been
dial
waiting
right here.
for. Yeah.
What did he say? Newsletter. Wow, that really gets me going. Yeah, I think people when they hear newsletter, they're like, "Yes, I'm in.
I would love some more newsletters
I
in
need
my
more
life.
emails."
Yeah.
That's what everyone in medicine was like. You know what? My email box is looking pretty sparse. I need a
Mhm.
few more to get that number over 1,000.
Yeah.
So the idea was that, if we could get people signed up for a newsletter, there would be a few benefits to the newsletter. One benefit would be kind of staying in contact of who the current guests are with a little extra information. Going back to when we had Dr. Burns on, Patrick Burns, the now residency director at West Virginia University, I think a lot of people, we got reached out to by how many people? Tons and tons
A
of people
lot.
about that
Hmm.
episode. Like, hey, I heard he's starting a program. I want to get some more information. So in a newsletter would be some contact information, a little blurb, maybe just a little bit deeper understanding of who the guest is and what they're all about, including some contact information if they're willing to provide that. It would also provide people information about the upcoming guests. So that would be the only place to find information about maybe the next 2 or 3 upcoming guests. People who subscribe to the newsletter are the only people that will get that information. Also, we'll do some merchandise giveaways. I've had enough people come up to me and ask, like, hey, where do you get the Pod Patrol? Hey, how can I get a t-shirt? How can I get whatever? And so finally I started a merchandise store. It's TeePublic, TeePublic, tpublic.com. Just so you know, I make $2 for every t-shirt, $2. So a few more t-shirts and I will retire early. Like, don't toy with me. If we sell like 10 more t-shirts, I will consider retirement.
You're done.
So it's really not a money-making scheme. It by no means covers any of the cost of the server to host the episodes, to produce the episodes. It does not cover anywhere close to any of the costs that go into this. But $2 per t-shirt I make, and there's some stickers and other garbage on there if you want it. But tpublic.com. So we will do some merchandise giveaways through to the people who are signed up for the newsletter. And then I thought 2 other things. Since you're involved with the school, I thought it'd be interesting to do some quiz questions. So we'll do a part 1 boards quiz section, a part 2 boards quiz section, and advance it from there all the way up to some really advanced questions that maybe aren't even really questions, maybe just more thought-provoking things, like when I'm doing a bunch of MIS things or some of the latest and greatest things that are even out there to consider. So we'll have kind of a quiz corner, and then the plan would be to do maybe a research article roundup. We involve some of the students. If any of the students listening are interested in doing a journal article review, 1 per week, we'll just pick a latest and greatest research article that's out there in any journal, break it down with maybe 3 or 4 bullet points and maybe a couple learning things. So really it's more educational but informational about the podcast as well. So we'll put that out there, and all 7 subscribers will enjoy, I bet.
So kind of again reflecting kind of back on this first year, I mean, there was a lot going on in life, and so to add this to the mix has been interesting. But I guess, what do you feel like was the piece that was most kind of like unexpected? What kind of came from this that you maybe didn't see coming?
Yeah, I didn't realize how engaged people would be with the podcast, and how much networking it's created for me. That was not the intention when I started out with the podcast, is to start lecturing in different places or to try to get anything out of it. That wasn't really the intention, but it's kind of one of those things that when you put yourself out there, well, all of a sudden you're out there for better or for worse. We all see celebrities, not that I'm a celebrity, but we all see celebrities, whether they're sports professionals or actors, whoever it may be, and you think positive thoughts, and then you can't help but think negative. Like, hey, that shirt is stupid. Why'd you wear that shirt? Right? Like, oh, you didn't shave again. Right? And you open yourself, luckily I haven't gotten any of those yet. I'm sure I will now. You open yourself up to some of the criticisms that go along with putting yourself out on the internet, which is okay. I think if you're going to do that, you have to expect some criticism and be able to kind of weather that or take it for whatever constructive nature there may be within that. And that's not true of just the podcast. That's true of life. It's probably a good skill to be able to take any constructive criticism and use that as a positive. But I didn't really understand how people would engage with the podcast and how much networking would come from it for both myself and the guests. I've had, like we said, Dr. Burns has had so many people reach out interested about his program. So the people, and Dr. McGill's program down in Florida, I've had multiple students want to go there because he was on the episode. So it's kind of a mutually beneficial thing. That's true of any podcast. When you listen to, you name it, Joe Rogan, NPR, any podcast across, they have guests on, and guess what they're doing? Oh, I have a book. I just released a book. Oh, I have my own podcast. Oh, it's mutually beneficial for both sides of it. But we have a small enough profession that there is a lot of networking that goes into this. And I wasn't really fully prepared for all of that.
No, I can imagine that. I think because we are so small, the networking piece, I think probably students maybe even underestimate that as they head out into like fourth year and beyond. Like you and I experienced that. There are people still now that we met out on fourth year rotations that maybe we run into at a conference or whatever. And you go to any of these conferences, ACFAS, APMA, whatever it may be, and you just look around and it's amazing how many people you start to recognize, and you realize how small we are. So I think that is a really important piece. Yeah, you definitely have been kept busy with LinkedIn has been a piece of this too, right? Because we have, beyond the podcast, you have kind of the Instagram social media side of it as well. And so between that and the podcast, it's a lot of moving pieces. I think you
Between the two, I think it's like 5,000 followers or something like that. And so it's really grown. And I think that's a testament, not really to me. I'll take maybe a little bit of credit, but mostly to the guests, because when the guests come on, they're the ones providing the interesting content. It's up to me to try to draw it out of them a little bit and try to ask some engaging questions. At least that's the intention. But really, that's who drives the growth of this podcast, are the guests. But yeah, LinkedIn and Foot Doc Duo on Instagram, and 15 Blades is a fantastic resource for people. I spend a decent amount of time over on 15 Blades as well. We're going to have the creator and the brain behind 15 Blades on as one of the guests in season 2. So I'm excited to talk to David about 15 Blades. So yeah, it's a lot of work. Oh, and I practice medicine and do surgery
in your spare time,
coach my kids' basketball games, and all the other stuff. So
yeah, it's actually harder than I think. From the few times I have graced the Pod Patrol podcast, it's harder than I thought it would be. And I remember the first episode or 2 or 3, the first couple that you did, I remember you feeling like it was challenging, even just reading the intro, right? And just kind of getting used to it. And at some point you just have to say oh, well, this just is what it is, and just go for it. But it's
kind of the difference between shooting a free throw in your driveway versus shooting a free throw at halftime in front of a huge, 15,000 seat stadium.
Sure.
It's kind of like, all right, now people are paying attention. Don't mess this up. You're like, what? Oh,
the pressure's on.
Yeah, the pressure. And I can't handle it. I just start flubbing up words and messing stuff up. Luckily, this is not live and we can edit out all my mistakes. But yeah, I mean, I think that was the hard part when we started the podcast from the get-go, season 1, episode 1, you turn the cameras on and you say, go.
Yeah.
What? I don't know what to say. Now what? I planned, the intro, and then we start talking. So because when you're in your natural life, things just flow and you're naturally talking. And eventually the more time you spend on anything, in this case, a podcast, it becomes more natural. Things start to flow and it becomes a little more interesting, as opposed to feeling very regimented, like walking down the list of okay, I'm going to say this and I'm going to say that. And those aren't the podcasts that people want to hear. They don't want to hear you read off of scripts. Like when you go to a lecture and they're reading their bullet points and you're like, yeah, I can read. I don't need you. If you're just going to read the presentation, I don't need you. I can read your bullet points. You can just email that to me. I need you to, expound upon these things that are on the screen. So I think a lot of that comes with time and comfortability with the podcast. But yeah, looking back, I remember vividly thinking, well, I can't get good at this until I'm bad at this first. You know, you have to do episode
Sure.
1, 2, 3, and 4 where you're just not very good. And I don't even know that I'm good yet, but you have to do those first few episodes to figure out what you're doing wrong so that you can make corrections to make sure that you're doing it right. So
Sure.
just like anything, it takes repetition and time, but eventually, yeah, you get a little more comfortable. Are you comfortable yet on the podcast?
No,
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 no.
no, no.
Maybe
It's
like episode 10, 20. I don't know
there
if
you
you'll be
go.
asked back though. This
Well,
might be
that's, I
it.
mean, that's true. This is
Yeah.
my moment to shine
You have to
because you
think
never
about
know.
that. You know,
Yeah.
everything you do could be the last time you do it. Like this might
Sure.
be the last time I ask you to be on the podcast.
Well, that's always possible.
You never know.
You never know. Is there anything else that we need to kind of touch on looking back? Season 1?
What were some of your favorite episodes? Dr. Burns
Ooh.
brought back some memories from
I know. I
residency.
think that one, there's a lot of nostalgia there. Obviously, he's a big part of our lives. And so that was really cool to be able to hear from him. And I really liked, there's just so many different viewpoints and different
Mm-hmm.
people that are doing cool things that, you know, I had no idea that they were out there doing. I really enjoyed when you had the flight nurse on, who was also
Heather.
one of your patients. She was awesome. And like her
She's so
story was
good.
so
Her
cool.
story is amazing. I
Yeah.
cannot imagine. She had to ride in the helicopter as a patient after her stroke, seeing the people that she normally does that job. She's a flight paramedic.
Yeah.
She was a patient on a medevac helicopter, and that's her normal job.
Yeah, it's
Can
wild.
you imagine? I mean, that was such a wild story. I think that was so cool of her to come on and talk through her pre and post recovery from having an MIS lapidus. I thought that would be a really interesting thing for people to hear the patient's point of view, because we get so bogged down with, oh, your screws are they're not parallel. They're well, is that a beveled screw? Like, all right, man. Like, golly, you
Yeah.
get so in the weeds. That's the downside of being in a profession that is so narrowly focused.
Sure.
I think lots of professions are narrowly focused. There's hand surgery, there's spine surgery. They're all narrowly focused, but we're
Yeah.
narrowly focused, and we get so in the weeds about things that you start realizing, like, does it really matter? Like, we are so nitpicky. And that's the thing. If you're going to be on LinkedIn, you have to build up such a tough outer shell, because there are going to be people coming out of the woodwork wanting to criticize every little thing. Like, oh, what? I didn't. Just like, dude, go away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that episode was a good reminder of, we talk about all this stuff all the time, but the whole point of doing this whole thing is to help people.
Yeah.
And so many of these things that we're talking about are really small and nuanced. Like, does it end up really being? Like, is there huge clinical significance if you do it this way and I do it this way and it's slightly different? As long as patients do well and people get better, then, you know,
I think
it's a
the
win.
answer is probably not. You know, we get so in the weeds, and whether you use 2 crossing screws or 3 crossing screws or a plate or bone graft or, you know, BMAC or all these things, you're kind of like, I don't know. Some of that maybe matters, but some of it doesn't.
I think the vast majority of that, though, comes from a good place, right? It's well intentioned, and that people are trying to maximize outcomes and make sure that we're doing the best job that we can. So, I mean, you can't fault that, but you're right. Sometimes probably we start to lose focus of the what's really important in all this.
Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention is that my intention when I started the podcast was for it to be visual, to have cases, to see x-rays. And I think it's very difficult because people don't have that extra time to sit and watch a podcast. They have time to listen to podcasts because they're commuting, they're, you know, working out, they're doing something else is when they're listening to podcasts. And I do the same thing. I listen to lots of podcasts, but it's usually on my commute to work. And so that was the other thing that I didn't really foresee, because I thought, oh, well, this is going to be way more interesting because you can hop on YouTube and you can see the x-rays. You can look the person in the eyes and see their excitement when they're talking about whatever they're passionate about. And I think most people, it turns out, based on the views and the things that I can see on the different Spotify, Apple, and YouTube, far, far more people are listening only. So I didn't really anticipate that, because it would be much easier if I just did an audio only podcast. But I think that kind of falls into not being different than some of the other podcasts out there.
Sure.
Dean's Chat with Dr. Jensen is a visual podcast, which I really enjoy because it just feels different when you can see someone while they're talking. I think I don't know, it's just a little bit better than listening only.
Yeah, but I think you're right though. I think if we're looking at when do people usually have time, I know for me, it's almost always when I'm in the car.
Yeah.
Or if I'm like cleaning, walking around in the house, whatever it may be. A lot of my favorite non-podiatry podcasts also have that visual component, but I rarely find myself watching them. I'm almost always just listening.
Yeah, it does help with the clips on social media when you can have the
Sure.
visual component, because that's going to draw people in. It's really impossible to have
Mhm.
an audio only clip on social media. That's not going to gain any attention.
Well, and I think you're still always open for ideas, or, if people have somebody they want to hear from or a topic that they want to hear about, then how do they let you know that? Do they
No, don't
no
reach
feedback?
out.
All right.
No,
All right,
don't
got it.
don't
Not big on the
micromanage.
feedback. Okay. All right.
No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, Foot Doc Duo on Instagram. You can send messages. I've had people reach out and suggest some guests. And the other thing I didn't really realize would be the number of people that would agree to be on the podcast but just never sign up. They're like,
it's
yeah, I'll
hard.
do it. I'm like, all right, sweet. Here's what you do. And then just crickets. I can't make a cricket sound. I'll insert cricket sound later.
Yeah. Life is busy. I can appreciate that, right?
Yeah. But then I don't want to bother them, because I don't know if they're saying yes because they're being nice and then they don't want to say no. I've had a few people not respond. Like I haven't
ghosted.
dated in a long time, and it's been like at least a year or two.
How long exactly has it been, Jeffrey?
I don't recall. We've been married 12 years. I know that.
Okay. Points for you.
Like ghosting people, I mean, I don't really understand all this, but like that's what it feels like. You send them a message, hey, I'd love to have you on the podcast, and just like, nope, nothing. But yeah, there's people that have said that that they do it and they don't sign up. But that's the other component that goes into this. Like I was mentioning, is the time component behind the scenes of like tracking these people down. It takes a lot of time for me to identify people, send them a message, and actually track them down to get them signed up for the podcast. A few of the people, usually people that are very predictable, usually people like Burns, are very much like, as soon as you send them the thing, it's like, boom, I'm signed up. I'm ready to go. I picked a date. We're going. We're doing it. And you're like, well, that was easy. And, there are some people that have that personality where like, if I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And we are going to do this. Are you free right now? I'll do it right now. Like, no, I'm not. It's 10 p.m. I'm going to bed.
Sure.
Yeah. But I think that was an interesting part of it too, is wrangling all the guests. So I was thinking about hiring someone to just manage the guests. So I didn't have to. Just like find the guest, book the guest, communicate with the guest, send them a reminder email the day of the recording, and then send a follow-up email that says, hey, thanks for being on the podcast. Here's when you can expect the episode. So if anyone listening is interested in doing that and wants to work for the exact same amount of pay that I get for this, I promise we will make the same amount of money.
It's so generous of you. Yeah.
Then reach out to me and you can be the guest wrangler. We'll even give you a special hat or something.
You'll have a title.
Says guest wrangler. Yeah. But I don't know. There's a lot of effort that goes into all this. That's part of you stops and you're like, is it worth it? Is this even... I think that's the number one reason people aren't successful with their podcasts, is they get 3, 4, 5 episodes in and they just stop, right?
Yep.
And I've heard that before. The show The Office, they were actively getting canceled season 1 and early into season 2, and they had to fight hard. And it's almost like if you can make it through that initial process, that doesn't necessarily guarantee you're going to be successful, but you'll never know if you are going to be successful if you're the one that pulls the plug too early. So you almost have to give it the old college try and see it through and see what happens and figure out if it's worthwhile in the end.
Well, we'll find out in season 2.
Is there a season 2? See, this is where the cliffhanger would have really come in handy. I was going to shed a tear.
I sabotaged.
This is going to be it. The end of Pod Patrol. And then, cliffhanger, goodbye. And now, no. Now people know there's going to be a season 2.
That's what you get for asking me to do the end of year review with you. You
Well,
think
I
you know what
appreciate you
you signed up
hopping
for.
on.
Yeah.
So thank you for being supportive of the podcast. It is a little bit of an inconvenience when I do hop into the Pod Patrol studio. Oh, new logo. That was the other thing I didn't mention. People watching online, new logo. Season 2 logo is refreshed. It's not that different, just a little color swap in there. It's kind of hard to see on the podcast on the screen behind me, but season 2 will be a little bit refreshed, a little bit new, some new guests. I'm super excited. We had to kind of drag people to be guests on season 1 sometimes. In season 2, it's been a lot easier to get guests on. Oh yeah, I'll do it. I've seen it. Yeah. It's hard because initially they're like, who the heck is this guy? Why do I want to be on? No. What are you doing? No.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the good thing, I guess, is it's been a lot easier to get guests to agree to be on for season 2 so far. And we're booked out a couple months. So I've been very appreciative of all the support that I have received for people reaching out, both people that I know and people that I don't know. And we will continue on Pod Patrol season 2 coming early 2025. Signing off on Pod Patrol, joined by my wife, Dr. Ashley Dikis. This is Jeff Dikis, and thank you for joining me on Pod Patrol season finale. See you guys next year.
Disclaimer. Opinions expressed are those of the content creators and do not represent any employer or entity. The information shared is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as medical advice or used in any legal capacity, including establishing standards of care. All efforts have been made to comply with HIPAA regulations. No guarantees are made regarding the accuracy of statements or opinions provided. Interaction with the podcast does not establish a doctor-patient relationship. Please enjoy this podcast responsibly.